Hello, everybody, and welcome to our final Salon Educational Webinar of 2025. I think this is number 66 in a series which started all the way back in June 2024 and has run every week continuously since. So I'm very happy to be here. I'm Adam Smith. I'm the Programme Director for Dementia Researcher, and again, I'm going to be your host this week. And today we're exploring organising your lab for maximum efficiency. A well-organised lab is the backbone of effective research, and it doesn't matter if your space is wet, dry, clinical or computational. The way it's set up shapes productivity and collaboration and morale. So that's not just the physical space, but in terms of the team and how you organise that too. And as ever, I'm joined this week, not by two, but by three brilliant speakers. First, we have Dr. Kate Harris from Newcastle University, who is an academic track fellow in drug discovery, whose work combines medicinal chemistry, cell biology, computational methods to develop interventions to target neuroinflammatory processes. And she'll bring perspective. She and her PhD student, the brilliant Jonty Jackson, is here as well, also from Newcastle University. And together they'll bring perspectives from managing across interdisciplinary projects, and particularly with a focus on some fantastic work they've done in their own lab. And alongside Kate and Jonty, we have welcoming back the incredible Dr. Dominic Trépel, who is an economist and assistant professor at Trinity College Dublin and in the Global Brain Health Institute there. Dominic has experience in applying economic frameworks to improve efficiency and outcomes across lots of different research settings. And I feel that that qualifies him inevitably to be an efficiency expert. And together, they're all going to share their perspectives, and they've all been shy at the moment. Their cameras and microphones are still off, but I'm sure they're going to come back on screen.
Good morning.
I can see if you're watching this live or if you're watching this recorded, just to recap on the format. So each of our speakers takes a turn to give about a 10-15 minute talk. They've been given a very broad, wide remit. We didn't tell them what to present about. They've been given a broad statement, which is about lab efficiency, and they've been open to interpret that however they saw fit. So I'm just as interested in you to hear what they've got to say today. So they'll each present, we'll have a little chat, and then we'll have a chance at the end for you to ask your own questions. And if you're watching this on recorded, you can post your questions in the chat, because all of our speakers are also members of the community too, and they'll see the messages you post and can reply to them. Or if you're feeling brave and you'd like to join us up on the stage, where you can activate your camera, and you're welcome to come and share your own perspectives if you have experience on this too, or you can just ask questions in the chat. But that's enough from me now. Dominic has very kindly agreed to go first today. So I'll invite Dominic to share your screen, and I'll stick around until we make sure that's working. Hi,
Dominic. Good morning. Hi, Adam. Good morning, everyone. Okay, so I'm going to talk today as an economist, really, but I'm also going to talk from the perspective of being a PI and a director of a research lab here in Trinity College Dublin. Topic for today is organising your lab for maximum efficiency. And as an economist, I suppose what I'd like to do is take you through some of how we think about that, but then I'll also be sharing reflections of my own practice. Okay, so I thought a useful starting point is to assume that, maybe no one's ever stopped and thought about what efficiency is, and to kind of put it into the context that we as economists think about it. And so efficiency really relates to productivity. So we have some forms of inputs. That's usually us at an early stage of our career, and it grows into a team of us. We have some funding and various things like that, and we're expected to produce, usually the currency is publications, but it will be essentially the research process that's reflected in the publication. So to think about efficiency, it's kind of trying to maximize your outputs with minimum inputs. Okay, so the idea of that is maybe you do not get the welcome grant that allows you to recruit 20 people, but you still need to hit the targets of what your institutions may need. So to think about how you can run things efficiently. So really thinking about value over volume, and also I think being efficient is also a good way to keep yourself sane and to also keep a group that may grow quite quickly motivated, because no one's necessarily working hard, they're going to be working smart. So in this, I've kind of considered that, if you are at the stage of career where you've brought in 10 million, you probably don't need to listen to me. And maybe a lot of people that will come to this are kind of at the stages of developing independence as an academic researcher. So securing their first grants and those kind of things. And there's some reflections of that. So one of the first things I would say is don't try to reinvent the wheel. Learn from others. There's if you're at that stage and you are kind of getting grants in, you're probably already going to be surrounded by some very good people, because they people that recruited you have already been down the same road. So learn from them and don't try to kind of reinvent labs. It's really useful to be in those environments. Right, so what I want to kind of first touch on is this idea of growth, and this is a schematic. Everyone's familiar with the bell-shaped curve, usually talking about things like normal distributions, but I'm going to look at it differently. And this is from product development. And so product development goes, or products coming to market go through different cycles. Initially, when you launch a product, it has a slow pickup, and that can be frustrating and can also kill your product. So people who have released multiple products in the past are very conscious about how that happens. And usually, if you've done well, you'll then go into a rapid growth phase. So that could be, right, I got the grant, now I have to recruit 3, 5, 10 people. And really at that stage, if you haven't got your startup right, you're going to get into a situation where any errors in your system are going to really come back to haunt you. So there's useful things to think about at the startup stage in terms of efficiency in preparing and expecting that you will grow. Usually with products, we think that there is a plateau. So this is the point at which, your growth has finished and you hit the maximum productivity that you would expect. In industries, what they tend to do is they think about, right, when we hit our plateau, we want to kind of stabilize there. We don't want to kind of people lose interest in our product, like a widget or something like that, right, there was a fad and it's gone and then your business is gone. So there is an expected decline phase, and a lot of companies will think about renewal. And I think these principles transfer very well to academia. Okay, so let's just start thinking a bit about money and how you start up. So if you're at an early stage of your career, be realistic about what kind of initiatives you're going to do, and the principles of how much money you bring in should probably start off with quick wins. This could be something you start off at PhD phases, just getting funding to go to conferences. A kind of postdoc stage, you might try to get something like seed funding, and then at early career stage, you start to build up into, larger amounts. So a 250,000 grant would be quite reasonable, which might grow to 500 million or a million plus. So thinking in terms of stages, I think one of the important reflections on that is work, even with small money, on your efficiency. The smaller the money is, probably the greater the efficiency you can work on, which will, as you grow, help a lot. So I always think, and I operate a dry lab, so people on computers as opposed to that. So a lot of my focus is around recruiting good people, and I think everyone should hone those skills, because unless equipment is critical, it's all about the people. So grow carefully in that respect. Often people are put under pressure to grow very quickly in academia. But in that rush, one bad hire can kill all of the approaches you've taken to efficiency. You can spend a lot of time dealing with a weak link. So also, as you're doing this, and I like to think broadly as opposed to go for this big win. I get smaller grants, but in that learn about finance, learn about the laws that surround hiring, and get to know people in HR. All those people, as you get more and more grants, will be vital relationships to you. Okay, so one thing is, we're doing this for a reason. Hopefully we enjoy going to work at the end of this, and that's really about seeing people that you like to see and like to work with. So I think there's some errors that people can get into in thinking that I've got a lovely person and everything's going to be grand. Whereas in actual fact, people like to know where they stand. So have organized schedules and a visible roadmap for what you're trying to achieve. And one of the things I learned very early on in this faculty position was attending a course by Swedish practitioners who had looked at various approaches to doing their PhD. And one of the things they found that was particularly useful for productivity is to decentralize ownership. We can think that we've got this hierarchical structure where, the PI is at the top and everyone else is working for them. I would flip that around and try to make sure that everybody in your group has a role, and have a shared mission, and in the shared mission have clear policies. Above all, I would create a culture where, toxicity, i.e. people, who may spend a lot of their working hours together in open plan shared offices, know that, toxicity is not allowed and that you want to have a positive culture, and have links in your labs, for example, that, bring up welfare, for example. From a leadership point of view, don't just be a supervisor. I think there's plenty of people go, right, these are the tasks I want you to do, get them done, and that's it. And you can find yourself in early stage of your career kind of picking up bad habits of previous generations of people that have just purely kind of squeezed the blood out of their employees. Be a mentor, take an interest in people's career trajectory, try to help them. I think overall that leads to better productivity and motivation in a group. So it's just some of my own thoughts on setting up a culture. Okay, and then there's the boring stuff, which is about processes, and really these are with a view to you may scale up quite quickly. Assign roles, as I said earlier on, let people have a role in the lab and review and rebalance those regularly. Maybe someone who wants to be the training lead decides that they want to do something else or something like that. That's fine, but make sure that everyone has a role, and if you're having lab meetings, that they come in and do that. So one of the roles that we had, as I said, is a training lead. And so in that person would receive requests from other people in the lab to attend training. And also we would have a policy like learn, teach, do. If you want to go on an expensive training course, X, Y, and Z, that's fine. We'll try to find you the money, or you'll self-fund, but certainly we'd release you for a day to go or more to attend. But we expect that when you come back, your learning won't just go on a shelf. You will also put it to practical application in whatever grant you're doing, but you will also, for the benefit of the wider group, do some teaching sessions, so share what you've learned. A second thing that is important for our processes is kind of having a cadence in how the group is running. So weekly, monthly, quarterly, and annually meetings that I hold in my group. So weekly, always focused on to-dos of what's happened last week, what are you going to be doing next week, is there things you're going to get stuck? So really kind of touching base type of stuff. Whereas monthly types of cadence has always been like, what are your goals? When do you want to publish a paper by? When do you want to get an analysis done by? So checking in on those. And then quarterly would be kind of, people getting focused on, successes and things like that, like, what's been published, what grants have been obtained, and those kind of things. And annual would really be where, as a group, we'd have a strategic meeting, and usually we would have some sort of team building aside that. So I think those kind of useful aspects. I always allow my group in this kind of Swedish fair. I delegate the chairing of all meetings that we have, and I also ask someone to take minutes. I think the minutes are the most important thing of keeping people on track. I don't like to have people that would just kind of take a running commentary of everything that's said. I like to kind of just focus for the things that people say they're going to do. So I keep the minutes action orientated to remind us what did we say we'd do last week, and move on to that. And obviously set ownership and dates in those. So for example, this is where I want to submit my paper and I want to get that done by then. So, having those clearly in those, and obviously you review those regularly. Okay, so This is a working practice that I think is important for efficiency to instill in a group. Get people to think about their time. You know, I like to, for example, write very early in the morning. I've got 4 kids, and if I need to write a paper up, you know, before they get up, I might be awake at 5 a.m., get that all done, and then fall into the busyness of the day. But I find that my brain is very good at that early part of the day for writing. If I know I'm going to do it the night before, I know that my brain thinks about it while I'm sleeping, and I usually flow quite well. Whereas if I go into work and I just open my emails and sit there, I know that my productivity drops immediately because I'm just wading through everyone else's issues before I get to my own work. So I kind of try to resist the culture of immediacy where people just expect their issue is your major concern. I leave my emails. One of my mentors has even, I've seen him kind of answer his emails at the weekend. I haven't quite got that confidence up yet, but I'm working towards, you know, you will get a response at the end of the week. I think that. Anyway, so other things like coding tasks or routine tasks where you know, save those for your energy. So like if people in my group are doing statistical analysis, there's no reason they can't do that sitting in front of the TV at night and just be coding up files. Obviously, when it comes to quality checking that they haven't got some bugs, that you know, maybe they approach it with a fresh mind, but thinking about your timing. Okay, so I wanted to finish with thinking about strategies to tell you a story. So my family business in the early 80s, my family imported wines, and this was like driving a truck over to France, filling it with as much wine as possible, and then bringing it over. There was a massive recession in the 80s, and you know, the market for wines kind of dropped out quite a bit. So that was what I would say is, you know, people are always thinking about going big, you know, 75,000 cases a year, bring them into the UK, sell them off, and, you know, get a massive amount of money. That's similar to going for big grants. After the recession, our family started selling sandwiches, and that was a high frequency, low cost business. You know, so I think that it's important to reflect on your own, where you're coming from as a researcher, and think, am I going to try and get the one big award and that's going to be my thing, or am I going to be collaborative and work with lots of different projects? This is a quote I've stolen as well from a colleague in York. There's only 2 real tragedies in academia. The first is not getting a grant, and the second is getting it. And that comes from the Oscar Wilde quote. But it's very true. I mean, we always kind of, at a certain stage of our careers, we're really worried, I haven't got a grant, this, that, and the other. But then you get it, and then you have to deliver it. And that can be equally as painful. So just plan around those. So my final call to action is improve one process and one relationship this week. And do that in the context of thinking about your own efficiency. Final point that Adam will know, I'm one of the faculty for the Global Brain Health Institute. We have a fellowship. So for people that are becoming emerging leaders, i.e. becoming PIs in academia and stuff like that, a lot of what we do is really helpful for this. So this opportunity to hang out with 10 or 12 different very well-established PIs, which is our faculty, but also to bounce ideas off other fellows, is really kind of changed this. So if you're interested, applications are open at the moment. Feel free to have a look at our website, and if you're particularly interested to apply, feel free to drop me an email. Okay, and that's me.
Thank you very much, Dominic. At the start there, you made me reflect on something. So I wrote a piece recently about how efficient systems can also be fragile, and how, particularly when you talked there about grant applications and streamlining and things, is that we're so cautious about not asking for too much or not saying something's going to take too long. And of course, there's so much drive to be super efficient in how we're organized and everything, that we can inadvertently create systems that then end up a little bit fragile, like dependent upon a single individual, or you know, not with as much time allowed afterwards. How do you balance, do you think, efficiency with and resilience in your kind of core teams?
Yeah, so no, great question. I think that basic principles as an economist I would go to is think about productivity before efficiency. I think people always jump into this culture of, right, we've got to be efficient and we've got to say everything up. I mean, if you're putting out what you need to, then you can start to refine that. So I think you're right that efficiency is something that everyone thinks they just inherently know how to do. And if you are becoming efficient, don't be afraid to, get expert advice. Like a lot of what I do for health systems and for my own research is about improving the efficiency of healthcare, and that is a massive beast. We often refer to systems of efficiency being like a bubble, right? A bubble is just the most efficient shape it can take. Now, if you're not happy when you look at a bubble and you're trying to change it, it will burst. So, think about marginal changes. So when you're thinking about culture and stuff like that, I think you're right. If you jump to efficiency, you'll probably lose more than you gain. So you can end up with those kind of issues of resilience that you were talking about. And, you don't want to get to that stage. I mean, first and foremost, you want to be productive, and then as you're scaling, become efficient, but be thinking about that early on.
I suppose planning for that is efficiency in itself, isn't it? I mean, I likened it to kind of a lot of the lessons we learned from around COVID-19, where things like supply systems that operate on just in time and things, when one part of that suddenly fails, or where there's a single point of failures that come in, are where we learn lessons, you'd hope.
Yeah. So, well, you hope, but you may also realize points of weaknesses in whatever process you're running only when it comes to a critical stage. And when, for example, if it's dependent on, say, a team, you might just realize that's the person I can't rely on, right? That's the person who might, turn on me when things get tough. They're delighted when the money's on, food's being put on the table, but so I think you often don't know those things, but I think that's different. That's a different problem to efficiency. I think that's kind of a production process. So if we bring back to kind of Adam Smith, the other one, it was all about defining an industrial process. I think my experiences working in the UK before coming back to Ireland, it's quite an industrial country. There, efficiency and productivity are kind of ingrained, whereas Ireland is different. Ireland probably didn't have the same industrial change. So I mean, you're always going to be thinking about the context that you're in.
Thank you, Dominic.
Sure.
Okay, so we've talked a little bit about people and places and teams and organisation and culture, and I think Kate and Jonty have got are going to come at this from a different angle now and talk about the physical space. So over to you, Kate and Jonty.
Hi. This was so inspiring. We were just having a little brainstorm whilst that incredible talk from Dominic was going on, and we're going to do a little bit following on and supporting or highlighting the importance of some of what Dominic said, as well as the physical aspects of the lab. And I'm going to introduce a bit, and then I'm going to hand over to Jonty. I'll explain that in a second. So for you, those of you who don't know me, I'm Kate. I'm a early career fellow at Newcastle University, and I've got an amazing team of PhD students, of which Jonty is one. And I've invited him here today because he is about 10, if not 20 times more efficient than I am as a human. And I remember Dominic was saying about, mistakes in your system could come back to haunt you in a phase of rapid growth. And I was one of those people that was under a lot of pressure to grow the team rapidly. I had 2 kids in the meantime, which is a big challenge for efficiency. Not 4, I appreciate, but I was setting up a group with 2 maternity leaves and a rapidly growing group. Basically, I fell victim to that lack of systems. And I think once the group got very big, I suddenly realized how inefficient I was as a person and how disorganized I am. And I could try and change that. But what I decided to do was to start building a team that could make up for my flaws in a way. And this was through personality, through natural talents, through organizational skills, the whole caboodle. I actually ended up going and doing a coaching diploma to start understanding people more so I could start making better hires and all this kind of thing. And Jonty was part of this new wave of wonderful hires where I saw something that I really valued and that I really wanted. His brain is remarkable too, absolutely, of course, but there is more, and he knows that, so it hopefully won't make him feel too uncomfortable being complimented. But it was more than that. It was personality, organizational skills, all these things that we could bring to the team. And I remember it wasn't actually too long ago, although I think the scope of it may potentially have grown since I came back from my second mat leave, that I said, look, to be honest, I need your help. The lab is very inefficient compared to what it was when it was just me in there. Now the group's like 10. I think we were 13 at one point. We run across 2 faculties. How do we operate? And we had a big thing about efficiency and effectiveness. That's really important, because a lot of time, I think, Dominic was saying this as well, he said productivity. My version of that is effectiveness. I'm sure they do mean different things in economics, I'm so sorry. But basically this concept of, you need to achieve what you're setting out to do, and that's not the same as efficiency. So be effective and then get better at being effective. So we had a chat, and I remember Jonty saying to me, we're probably going to have to tear down the entire way the group works and then build it back up again. And I was just like, go. So I won't say too much more, because Jonty's got some really great thoughts on what he personally saw and what he's sorted out in the lab. He won't give himself credit enough for what he has also done from a people culture aspect. So if we need that, I will come back and highlight that too. But he does have a qualification in efficiency, and I think that is a really important point. So I'm going to hand over to you, Jonty, if that's all right.
Yeah, thank you. So just sort of set the scene in a way. Before I started in Kate's group, I worked in various industry labs, mostly at the larger scales, where this sort of efficiency is you need to be efficient in the lab practically in order to make sure that time frames are met, to make sure that your billables and you get to achieve what you're trying to do for whichever client you're trying to do it for. So when I transitioned back into an academic setting, it was a bit of a sort of culture shock and a massive change of pace. But one of the things that sort of like stuck out to me straight away was, I remember I used to work with a lady who her job was essentially efficiency of the business. And she always said that the deadly phrase was, "This is the way we've always done it." And that just sort of stuck with me. So when I came back into the academic setting, we basically inherited a much larger lab space from a retiring academic. And from that, it gave us the opportunity to essentially break down everything that we currently had, to look at it and go, okay, we've got this, but what do we actually want the lab to look like? And what have we currently got? And how do we go from A to B? So we basically just applied the sort, set, order, shine, standardize, and then sustain, which is, it's a concept taken from the car industry, essentially, which is how they stay efficient for making loads of the same thing constantly, but you can apply it to pretty much anything. So from the lab perspective, the main thing was it needed to be sorted out. So we needed everything to have a place. Everything needed to be then returned to that place, and nothing could go missing, because the biggest waste is going to be time. If we've got to spend loads of time trying to find things, or if we haven't ordered something and then we have to wait for it, we're losing our own time, and therefore we're not being as efficient, and therefore, especially experimentally, we're not being effective, because we can't do what we need to do within the time frame that we've given ourselves. So that was the major one, is getting everything, common use items, removing anything that was damaged, anything niche that either served no purpose or was just kind of there for whatever reason, just because you know, academic labs sometimes can be quite old, and things just remain from years gone by. So it's getting rid of all of it, and then everything that we do want to use, we can put in a specific place we want to. We can organize all of that based off what we're going to use the most, and then making sure that what we use the most, everything that we need to be readily available on hand, is within a reasonable reaching distance. And then from there, it's making sure that that method is standardized, not necessarily written down, but you could write it down, just basic standard operating procedures, and then that can be centralized and passed down to people, to the next round of PhDs that come in, so that it's not just getting lost and then the cycle repeats itself, where we end up sort of, it becomes really efficient for a bit, and then that one person leaves, and then it goes back into a realm of maybe inefficiency again, and it's sort of this revolving door. And then it's looking at how we sustain that. And with sort of a relatively sort of small, like 10, 13 people, it's not too difficult to sustain that, because we all talk to each other. So it's easy to have that agreement amongst ourselves, to be able to be like, no, we're going to do it this way, we're going to stick to it. And then anything that we don't stick to, we go back and we look and we go, okay, we've clearly not stuck to this. So what is it that is the issue, and why are we not sticking to it? And that's pretty much what we've applied in the lab, to make sure that we've got everything and we can work as efficiently as possible, because we have so many things where it's just tiny things that can go missing really easily. And this is a wet lab scenario, so it's you have so much stuff, and you have to fit it into a space that you don't have control over, because these things have to be applied to the space that you have. If in an ideal world you could build the perfect space, it would be amazing. But because we still work across sort of 2 rooms, we still work across technically 2 faculties, so we sometimes have to travel to a different building, which you could argue is not the most efficient way to do these things, but there's always a line to draw somewhere. So it's about applying a certain set of rules and sticking to them within your own space, and making sure that you're not essentially almost hoarding things, especially in a wet lab where it's really easy to do, and trying to just remove anything that actually serves no real purpose, and nobody uses, and nobody knows why it's there, which is often the case. So that's pretty much what I've come up with today, of how I sort of interpreted what Kate asked me to look at when she mentioned this.
That's a massive thank you to you, Jonty, for coming on. I think he was a little bit like, what are you doing, when I initially asked? But I am not qualified to discuss on this. Like I said, I deliberately asked for his help because I am so poor at efficiencies. But I think we're quite effective. I think it's going well. And I think the other thing I wanted to mention about all of this is it is about finding people that you can support to take on important roles. You can't do it all yourself as a group lead, and nor should you. And your team, you're all supposed to be in it together. I know theoretically there's a hierarchy, but I mean, I say to you guys, don't I, the only time I would ever pull down on that and pull rank would be over either bullying or harassment or health and safety. Other than that, I want all voices to be equal. Yeah. I think broadly we try our hardest to stick to that, don't we?
Yeah, we do. Yeah, I think you're right. For everyone that's in the team currently, bullying wouldn't even be. It's not tolerated at all.
Yeah. I guess that ties into some of what Dominic's saying. And the only thing I wanted to pull up on that, not pull up, that's not the right word. sort of resonate with that Dominic said was about matching your energy to your tasks. So we quite routinely suggest things like thinking days, which basically is code for go away, watch trash TV and do something that doesn't require thinking, because, you know, those days are important. Or a couple of weeks ago, we had this big discussion where I went around after finding out just how hard everybody had been working, because they were all sharing each other's successes, and it was amazing. And then I was like, whoa, this is insane amounts of productivity. You, when you're taking a holiday, you, when you're taking a holiday. And we actually like planned it in, didn't we? Particularly before your massive inventory, which, yeah, you needed a break before that. So I think it's that as well. Match your energy, recognize if you're a peaks and troughs kind of person, and don't put yourself under pressure to be consistent if consistency is challenging, which I'm coming to learn is the case for most people. It's not easy to be consistent. And then I'm going to shut up because I think that's probably enough.
That was great. Thank you very much. You've both mentioned this now about kind of drawing on industry and other sectors outside of academia that have systems we can learn from. Something we've talked a bit about before is how researchers could draw down on things like proper project management skills or Q&A and audit and things like that we don't often do. Are these tools that you've brought into your own work? Kate and Jonty, I'll ask you that first. Jonty, maybe.
I'm just trying to think, because I've had a lot of, so my previous job was I did all of the organization and setting up of the entire system for large scale chemical process development. So taking things from a small scale and putting them and making kilos of a material. And that's why I did all the paperwork, all the safety assessments, and working a lot with the project managers. And there's a lot that you can take from it. And I think one of the major ones I would say is it's talking to people. It's if you're in the same space or you need to something needs to be done urgently, it's actually getting up and going to talk to them rather than just sending an email. Because sometimes you might discover something that you didn't realize, which has happened multiple times. A few times it was just safety, but other times it was just, oh, hold on, we've got this wrong here. And that only came about through going and talking to someone rather than just an email chain where you'd never have realized.
Yeah, Jonty fixed an entire assay based on a conversation that other people had been sort of too reluctant to have. Not that there was anything intimidating about it, but we were all stuck in that group think of, oh, I'll just send another Teams message. And then Jonty just literally got up, walked over to the other building, had a chat with the person, was like, yeah, we need to fix our assay. So it's that kind of thing.
Well, that's where, I guess this is where, having formally done the kind of Prince 2 and the kind of programs training that you can go through in the past, I'm always always slightly skeptical, because we're constantly telling PhD students that when you're trying to translate your CV into something for industry or for another sector, that you can talk to the things you've done in the lab as being project management skills, which of course you can. But I do realize that those skills often fall short of those formal processes that you gain from that project training, and having that documentation process to say, right, okay, we've got paperwork for this. That couldn't have happened because you had a system where there was a paper trail that problems got flagged. What's the word I'm looking for? When you've got a system in place where something's an outlier, it automatically flags. Dominic, help me out here. You nodded your head a few times there.
I would like to profess to being a mind reader, but I'm not sure.
Are you talking like a deviation report?
Exception reporting. That's what I'm going.
Okay.
Yeah. And you'd have an exception reporting process as part of a kind of, if you were using Prince 2, you know, if you were using these formal things, and you'd package it up and you'd set. And so I think some of the problems that we have with people not necessarily quite knowing what they're supposed to do, or just putting up with things when things go wrong, is because we haven't set out from the outset what these standards are, or put documentation in place? Because we're just all a bit keen to crack on.
I think it's interesting because what you're mentioning, this is actually really useful. So thank you for inviting us to be a part of it, because we're in that phase where we're like, right, we need to change everything to become more efficient and effective so that everybody can just enjoy their job as opposed to be panicking about all of it. So actually, we're looking for things that maybe are done in industry or in charities or wherever that could make things work. Some of it's going to be nuts, but some of it, like I said, like the coaching, SOPs, etc., those things are very powerful. So it might be that we go back and we look again at the things that are done in industry. And it's made me think actually that it wouldn't have occurred to me to suggest, you know, when you're supposed to have your 10 days in the researcher Concordat for self-development, or you're supposed to have your time as a PhD student, it wouldn't have occurred to me to go, are you interested in project management training? But now I can put that on my list of options.
Honestly, I mean,
for people.
I think one of the things about Prince 2 or MSP, the Managing Successful Programs, is I think anybody who teaches it now will say you don't have to completely adopt this. You can take elements from it to suit your own space or your own way of working, because not every lab or team needs that. You know, otherwise you'd just be drowning in paperwork for every single thing. But I think there are lots of tools out there. Dominic, what things have you taken from industry to bring into?
Okay, so just I worked in industry for a while, so I can tell you about that experience later. But one of the things I would say is that research has become an industry in itself. And I think my experiences in doing research in the UK is you kind of forget that you're in such a industry. I mean, Kate, you're talking about SOPs and, you know, various policies that say you should work on self-development. I mean, that's partly because the UK has a research career track. You know, you don't have to become an academic and work your way through like lecturer, senior lecturer, and produce some research and all that. You've got an industry, and particularly in the UK with NIHR and different types of funding like that really can support people to be specifically in academia, in a research industry in academia. So that's 100% on research, which is not a given in every country in the world. I would say a lot of academia has a kind of research is by people who are in teaching departments who essentially have a 40-40-20 split, research, teaching, and some contribution to society kind of thing. So they're struggling to kind of get their research done in, you know, 2 days a week, and maybe they've got some time over the summers to do that. So that's the paradigm that we're coming from. You know, if you go back 20-30 years, there wasn't this massive amount of research going on, and now we're talking about something approaching like trillion, or I'd say probably an estimate of about 100 billion a year globally is spent on kind of academic research. That's just a guess, and you know, it's probably going to be tending to being even higher figures at the rate we're growing. So suddenly it's an industry in itself. It's not that we have to go to the private sector to get those experiences. So everything that's from the private sector, like the Prince 2 training and various things that think about having efficient processes, are naturally coming in because, you know, they will. And I suppose also we produce too many PhDs nowadays. So there is a spillover of people that don't retain positions in academia going into industry. So there's this kind of traffic going backwards and forwards. So that's my views about where these processes are coming from. I think they were the same bright people that can find themselves on either side, and we've, you know, probably some of our mates are in industry and some of us are in academia, and we kind of talk about amongst themselves. And I think Jonty, your examples kind of show that as well. You know, that you're bringing that into academia. I think I worked in the pharmaceutical industry before, like in my 20s. Went through a couple of mergers, worked in me and a few other people set up a pharmaceutical startup company in Cambridge. So had all sorts of different experiences. And then I did consultancy for the pharmaceutical industry. And that was all before going into academia. So I had a lot of experiences, and, you know, industry definitely drills this stuff into you. You know, they take super bright people, right? And then they, you know, I think they over recruit, and then they stick you in endless amounts of training courses. I think that culture in academia doesn't necessarily exist. I think we, Kate C, I think you highlight the possibility that it should exist a bit more. And I think what you're doing sounds like you're embracing that paradigm shift, but we're building on the previous generation, right? That didn't think like this. So there's a lot of things that are new areas. I'll be quiet there now because that was a turbo rant.
Oh, you make a good case there for suggesting that everybody would benefit from a spell in industry in some way, that there are definitely things you can take that. I think, one of the issues that's often blamed at academia is, in drug discovery, I guess, Kate, maybe, is that academia is a bit slow. It's not very efficient.
Gosh. So, sorry, I'm sure Jonty will agree with me. So I did spend a bit of time in industry, not long, but long enough to come back. And I mean, there was a good period of 6 months mourning for industry. I don't like being told what to do, which is why I'm better off in academia. And I also have a big thing about changing culture. I have to remind myself routinely when I'm fed up of culture that I deliberately chose this path for this reason. But the slowness, oh my goodness, everything takes a minute. Jonty, remember diplomacy, but I am sure that you have discovered some challenges with slowness.
I think it was my biggest challenge in my first year, was switching that mindset from being like, I need to do this now, to, oh, it doesn't actually need to be done. Oh, it's never going to get done now. And it's difficult. It's difficult when you were out of academia for that long, and then you go back and your brain just runs a million miles an hour, but everything else doesn't. And it took that entire first year to sort of like blend the two together to where it's sort of like a nice status quo.
It's hard.
But it was difficult, yeah.
And I think there's some elements of, to be creative and innovative, you need to slow down. You need to create space. And particularly in our field, we're doing drug discovery, but we're not doing the stuff that industry would do. That would be ridiculous. They have billions of pounds and all the equipment. We're doing the tricky stuff, the stuff that they wouldn't even touch at the moment because it's too risky. Dementia, neurodegenerative disease, neuroinflammation, this is all too hard to currently really do in industry. Massive sweeping generalization. Sorry, anybody in the pharmaceutical industry who watches this and thinks I'm wrong. I just mean the tricky bits. But we have to create space. We almost have to create a period of nothing filling the blanks, because that's when you come up with the innovative solutions. So the slowdown is nice, but I think because...
Oh. Anybody else here, Kate, or is it just me that's lost?
Yeah, I think she's frozen there now.
Oh, am I back?
I can hear you. Yeah, I think so.
Where did I get to? It was probably boring anyway.
No, it wasn't boring. And I think there's that balance, isn't there, between, being SpaceX at one end of the spectrum, which is, kind of do everything really rapidly, learn and break stuff and then just do it again. And academia at the other end, where there are so many checks and balances that even publishing a paper can be a very long process that you wouldn't expect, that they wouldn't stand for that. There's one more thing that I had point. We're kind of coming up. We've only got 10 minutes.
I just want to
left.
jump in on your point there. I mean, I think what we're thinking about is frequency here when we think about productivity, like, that we're, productive and, that what we're putting out. But I think one of the things between industry is, so just to put this point in before, sorry to cut across you, Adam, is like, we also in academia for a reason. And it's not only about quantity and meeting the metrics that people around us say are important to progression. It's to remind us that we have academic freedom. We are trying to make the world a better place, particularly like where other parts of the world now are kind of working against academia in some ways. And so we've got to remind ourselves that we're here for a reason. So in our productivity, we've got a certain idea of quality and something that we think is useful to society. So that shouldn't be, we shouldn't just get busy and say, look how productive we are and like how efficient we are. We should kind of say, we have a mission, we have a vision, whatever that might be for any given research group, and focus on that to the betterment of society. Because otherwise, we may as well go and earn 3 times as much in industry. If we, yeah.
So
Yeah,
true.
and having that space.
Yeah.
Go on, Kate. Sorry.
I was going to say, I don't know what your thoughts were, but Angelina and I mean the other attendees, they've made a point which feels quite emotional, and I want to give space to it because it feels like it.
That was already next. You go ahead.
Oh, it's okay. Does someone else want to speak? Because it was originally actually written when Dominic was speaking, so I don't want to.
I know. So we have had only one question from the audience there, which is Angelina asked, my impression is in academia is often expected that motivation should be intrinsic and people have to be incredibly resilient. I feel this makes PIs less likely to be willing to invest in mentorship and leadership skills development. We're interested in your thoughts on that. Kate, as you raised it, why don't you answer that first?
It makes me sad, and that's why I want to give space to it. And I don't have a one-size-fits-all thing. I think there is a wave and a movement of newer academics that perhaps are, I guess you're talking about a paradigm shift. And it doesn't mean that academics from previous generations don't believe in this too, but there's definitely a momentum building in thinking about the experience, the development of your team. You know, to me, it's nonsensical not to develop your team and care about them, because it's greater than the sum of each of its parts. Plus, why would you bother becoming an academic if you didn't care about the next generation? But basically, this is the kind of thing where you need to find a person that fits with your values. There are more and more people getting on this train, which I'm thrilled to see. And we don't always get it right. So, you know, I say this all the time to the team. I'm going to mess up. I'm going to piss you off. I'm really, really sorry. Let's just be able to talk about it. So there is now this element of, we know that the more we invest in you, the better you will be and the happier you will be. And that is our purpose.
And that should make sense, right? I mean, if you've got a team that's well mentored, which we talk about so much in this space, and have got the skills and things, that will add to the efficiency of your lab or your group. I mean, it
is nonsensical not to do it, because innovation comes from happiness.
I think also as well that we've seen this across, that there is a shift that I think every new PI wants to do the best that they can, but they will be the first to admit, Kate, that you don't necessarily make all the right decisions or get it right straight away, that there's a lot to take on. And I do feel like there comes a point. We did a series called Ask the Mentor, a podcast series, which is available in YouTube and in our podcast app a while ago, where mentees interviewed their mentors, and most of them were pretty senior by that stage, and you definitely got, when you asked them about what motivated these days, it wasn't about discoveries and papers published, it was about the people that they brought on and what they did next. That's where they took their satisfaction.
I'll jump in on that, if that's all right.
Absolutely.
I think you get busy doing your day-to-day work, and you've got your deliverables of whatever projects you've got going on. But then there's also a relationship building, because you work with people for long periods of time. I always describe PhDs as a marriage and say, you know, before we get into doing this long process, let's just work out whether the relationship is going to work, because we will kind of go through all sorts of things like that. But I think mentorship isn't new. I mean, there's been movements by, say, Wellcome to really get people to rethink what mentorship is in research, and thinking mentee to mentor processes, like you say, is important. But I think that longer term trajectory, you know, that we will go through waves of ups and downs. And I think, to Angelina's point about this intrinsic motivation and resilience, I think a mentor should be aware of that. You still have what you have to achieve, but they should be aware of that, and they should also be pointing the person towards the longer term goals. Why are you doing this job with me right now? Where do you want to get to? Because that can find some of that motivation and resilience because I've been down that road. I always say, because with GVHI, we do a lot of mentorship. We set up people with regional mentors around the world so that they've got someone who supports them when they return to their home country afterwards. But that, is that person in a job that you want to be in? So is Jonty hoping to be Kate one day, for example? They work together, and do you want to learn from how you got there and those kind of things? Maybe not. Maybe you're just happy working together. But when you decide I want to be, this is where I want to get to, I think it's important to kind of select your mentors, not only to tell you what you want to hear and to keep you motivated, but to get you to where you want to be. Anyway, so I'd jump in on that because Angelina's point was a bit related to my bringing that up.
Absolutely. We'll get one of your PhD students in next time, Dominic. They can
yeah.
It's a bit intimidating. I was like, if I bring Jonty on and he's actually like, this is all rubbish, Kate. Why do you talk like this? You're useless. But I have neurotically checked with him offline, and he's been like, no, you don't sound like a total idiot. I think one of the things I wanted to say was about authenticity. So I appreciate we've only got a couple more minutes, but it's also about being authentic and admitting that motivation waxes and wanes, and that resilience. I get really annoyed when I hear people just casually say resilience, because I maintain that some people have so much going on in their lives that they probably show more resilience getting out of bed in the morning than other people show in a year. And that's obviously a very, very extreme version, but it does get me cross when this word gets like bandied around. The truth of the matter is everybody struggles, everybody has challenges. And it's not to diminish what people's challenges are. In fact, it's the exact opposite. Let's own it. Let's make it a real thing. I remember we had a group meeting, middle of last year, I think, where we were all feeling really flumpy and we were all really unmotivated. And we had a meeting where I was like, does anyone want to talk about mental health? Some people didn't want to talk. Some people did want to talk, but we were clearly all off. And if I pretend that I'm perfect, it would be impossible, because they know how chaotic I am and the team have to remind me about everything all the time. But it means that people feel that they're not good enough. And Absolutely. That makes me angry, because I'm saying angry a lot. Because why would you hire people who are putting their faith in you and your vision as a leader and then not treat them well? So I guess my belief to you, my thing to you, Angelina, is please reach out to us if you would like to talk about this a bit more. This feels like it's, and I think it was that Jack at least also mentioned this. Please, we want to be able to engage with you on this if this is making you sad, because I don't want to diminish it. It's a common feeling, but it shouldn't be.
Not at all. Sorry. I completely agree.
And I just want to jump in on that. I think that got quite emotional. One of the things that one of my mentors at PhD said to me, he was a health economist who was probably one of the first people to theoretically show that doctors like to make profit, which was very unpopular back then. And so he was largely attacked by the medical community globally. And this is back in the 70s or whatever he was doing this. And he would always talk about his mental health and say, you should be comfortable to come forward. I mean, because we in academia put a lot of, like, our brains are what people really want. We want bright people around us. So we put them under a lot of strain, and it does take its toll. So having a long-term view of that, and that if you're going to be in this industry, that you've got to look after, all of the softer side of things. It's not all about, proving and hitting your targets, because for example, we can work 40 hours a week and our productivity is fine. If we do 70 hours a week, we can do that for a while, but eventually economics shows that you start to drop off. The same thing's happening with our brains. We have to look after them, and we have to, anyway, so final point on that point, is just to okay, make sure
I'm going to wrap up in our usual way. So if you're not persuaded yet that efficiency is a good thing, here are some stats for you. A Nature survey found that 80% of researchers feel that time is wasted due to poor organization and duplication of work. Studies suggest effective data management alone can reduce project time by up to 25% in biomedical research. The average researcher spends, I don't know if I believe this or where this came from, but it was the Royal Society apparently, 1 full day per week searching for information or data. When you can't remember who sent you that email and you spend 15 minutes doing it, or you've created something before. I'm not sure I believe a day a week, but I certainly feel that pain. And the labs using electronic notebooks apparently are 30% more efficient. And the 2023 UK Research Office of Integrity reported highlighted that lab organisation is a key factor in preventing research waste and misconduct. One thing you'll know, we always wrap up these things because we have an AI that's been trained specifically on content from the Dementia Researcher website. We have over 3,000 pages of content. That's transcripts from every podcast we've ever produced over the last 5 years, every one of the 800 plus blogs on our website, all the articles, all the transcripts of every one of our salon webinars in the past. And every week I ask that. So this is not from the internet, just from our trustworthy sources. And every week I ask it, what would be the top 10 takeaways on a given subject? And then we can see if the body of knowledge that is Dementia Researcher has been captured by our wonderful speakers. So number one, define what efficiency means in your lab and environment. I'm pretty sure Dominic said that quite straight up front. Number two, map workflows and identify bottlenecks regularly. Number three, use digital tools for things like data storage, sharing and project tracking. Number four, invest time in onboarding and training new staff, particularly on systems and processes. Make sure they've got the skills you need. Number five, standardize protocols where possible. Number six, design physical space that is accessible, safe, and enables workflow. Share calendars and booking systems is number seven. Number eight is review and update systems and projects as teams evolve. Number nine is encourage a culture where people feel able to flag inefficiencies and suggest improvements. And number 10, which perfectly, you all nailed this one. Remember, efficiency is about supporting people as much as it is about supporting projects. Morale and collaboration are as important as speed. I think you get 10 out of 10 there for everything you said. Was also validated and QA checked by our resident AI. Thank you very much to the incredible Dr. Dominic Trépel, the wonderful Jonty Jackson, and the unstoppable Dr. Kate Harris. You've been amazing. Thank you very much. This is, as I said at the start, the last of our educational salon webinars for 2025. They will be back in the new year. What we've got now is we've got a 2-week break, and then we're going to be back on the 15th of October, where we're going to start our, I think it's 10-week debate series, which the first one is on, raises the question, we have nothing, wait, hold on, let me get this word for word, I don't want to put people off. The House believes that animal models have outlived their usefulness in dementia research. And to argue for that motion, we have Professor Michael Coleman from Cambridge, and to argue against it, we have Lucia Katsuri from UCL. That's just the first, just jumping straight in on a controversial one to start with, but we are going to move on as the weeks progress for should we be funding more biomedical research versus social care? Should genetic testing be a factor for all over 40s? Should we be funding more on prevention rather than treatment? Is AI increasing disparities in research? Should we be allocating funding by lottery now rather than by peer review? Is the peer review system beyond repair? These are some of the topics we've managed to find people to argue both sides of all those motions, and that starts every week, every Wednesday from the 15th. Get it right, from the 15th of October. So we hope you'll join us in the salon in 2 weeks' time for our special debate series. Thank you very much again, Kate, Dominic, Jonty. You've been brilliant, and we'll see you in a few weeks' time. Bye-bye.